to future agendas? Nope, okay. So we are now at at public invited to be heard. We are a study session tonight, so it's one public invited to be heard. And I'm waiting on the list. I think she went to go get it. Do you want to do that?
I didn't want you to do that. Yes, please.
Okay, so you start with this, and then you'll hit OK when they start. Whoops. Let me go back.
Okay, how do you get to P1? Is it
This, the three lines.
okay?
Uh-huh, and then hit OK. Okay, the first name on the list is Connie Hamming.
Wait for them to say their name, or just try to give
As
it.
soon as they come up to the podium, I'll start, because it's really loud. Yeah. And don't forget to turn on your mic.
I think it's on.
Okay, perfect.
Can you hear it okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, this is, my name is Connie Hamming. I reside at 2129 Winding Drive. I have never before done anything like this, so I'm out of my comfort level. So please forgive any errors in protocol. I would like to address the matter of multiple registered sex offenders living together in one single home in a residential neighborhood, basically for the purpose of treatment required by the state as a condition of their release from prison. This is, I believe, an unintended consequence of the state's eliminating the rule that said no more than 3 unrelated people should reside in one single-family house. Their intent was to reduce rent and make it more affordable. But instead, we have investors who are taking advantage of this change in regulations to set up lucrative businesses in residential areas. They are opening treatment-type centers, mini hotels, not renting out rooms to a bunch of buddies trying to get away from their parents' house. And the rent is not really affordable. These businesses are detrimental. They, first off, seem to be detrimental to the offenders themselves, as this is not a way to assimilate into the neighborhoods. And also, it is detrimental to the homeowners in the neighborhoods, as these treatment centers will probably affect the values of their homes. And finally, it's detrimental to the city, as the desirability of our neighborhoods decline. The city's desirability will also decline, especially a city like Longmont, which is known to be family-friendly. It is a complicated issue, I realize, but that doesn't mean that the council and the city should not act immediately to stop more of these treatment-type centers, types of business, from opening in our residents' neighborhoods. Several surrounding cities have adopted restrictions to the number of registered sex offenders who can reside in one house. Such a restriction would end these types of businesses opening in our residential neighborhoods. It would protect the property value of our neighborhoods, and it would make it easier for sex offenders to finally assimilate into our neighborhoods once their recovery has been accomplished. I realize, again, that this is a complicated issue, and additional ordinances may be required after thoughtful and thorough study. But restricting the number of offenders living together is something that can be done now, and I ask that you do so to protect us all. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, it's not as easy as you think. Yeah, there. Okay, the next person on the list is Anna Graves.
Okay. My name is Anna Graves, and I reside at 2293 Winding Drive in Prairie Village South. I'm here today to speak up for my sweet 4-year-old boy who's currently being tucked into bed for the night. I'm here on behalf of all of the children of Longmont that frequent Rough and Ready Park, that walk home from Alpine Elementary School alone, that ride their bikes throughout the streets of our community. I'm here because their innocence needs protecting, and if their parents and their city can't protect them, then I ask you, who will? The children of Longmont don't know what exists out in the world. I pray that they will never be faced with the terror of sexual assault or abuse. Does this body want the same for them? The lack of swift action by this body to address the 5 registered sex offenders living in a single-family home that's been turned into a recovery facility in our neighborhood who committed crimes in the past year, one as recently as 6 months ago, is simply unacceptable. Mobara's Solutions is not a solution. It is a company run by a man who is making money off of others' pain under the premise of addiction recovery without any care, consideration, or interaction with the children or families in our community. The appearance of these registered sex offenders seemingly overnight with no communication to us or the HOA or our community makes it clear that Mobara's has absolutely no interest in community integration or true rehabilitation. If he did, he would not be placing these registered sex offenders with children visible from their bedroom windows. I'm here to beg this council to move faster and take action. Please put an ordinance in place immediately that prohibits a home of 5 registered sex offenders to be living so close to areas frequented by hundreds, if not thousands, of children. Please remove these individuals from this house where they should never have been placed to begin with. I beg you, please protect the childhoods of our kids and the safety of our community.
Thank you. Jake Marsing?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring, and members of council. Jake Marsing, 1880 Red Cloud Road, Longmont, Colorado. I'm here tonight to address and support the issue that you all are considering later this evening, the expansion of the city's down payment assistance program. Now, my family and I have been lucky enough to call Longmont home for 5 generations, and in that time we've seen a lot of change. We're not the farm town my great-grandparents settled in. We're not the bedroom community I grew up in. Longmont's a 21st century city with 21st century challenges, and right now we're at a real crossroads as to what kind of community we are going to become. We can become a city that's reserved for the elite. We can become a transient community with a growing divide between the well-established and those left behind by skyrocketing costs, unable to afford to put down roots in the city we love, or we can choose a third path. And that path is to become a city that fosters opportunity for working people, and one where diverse families who make Longmont the vibrant community it is can afford to build their lives here. I have been lucky enough to see firsthand how hard it can be to go through this process. My mom, a 3rd-generation Longmonter and a teacher, some of you know her, despite her deep roots in this community and her steady career in public service, when she wanted to buy her home, the biggest obstacle that she had to home ownership wasn't finding the house, wasn't finding the realtor, it was being able to save for that down payment. It took years of saving and navigating a system that often feels stacked against working families just trying to get ahead, and I know she is not alone. The down payment assistance program you're reviewing tonight is a crucial step in ensuring that Longmont remains a place where people from all walks of life can remain in this community and put down roots. And by expanding this program, you have the chance to make ownership more accessible, especially for those struggling to get their foot in the door. And as you consider the fixes that staff is bringing to you, and they are good fixes, I do want to encourage you to look at ways to scale this program. To look at ways to meet the full scope of the crisis that working families are facing, so that that $40,000 maximum that the DPA is suggesting can turn into a number that more accurately reflects the true cost of housing in this community. I hope this is a question that gets asked tonight. I hope someone raises what's the long-term plan here if we do intend to scale this, because we need to ensure that working families can use this program to get ahead and not just keep up, because we need a Longmont where people, whether they're teachers or healthcare workers or small business owners, can afford to live without being forced out by rising costs. That's a vision that aligns with your values, and I appreciate your work tonight as you consider how to fix and expand this DPA so that you can continue working to build a Longmont that works for everybody. Thank you.
Yes. Did it work? No, it didn't. Okay, thank you. Okay. Gary Hodges.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Gary Hodges, 2148 Stewart Street. So I'm speaking tonight about the Distal property, composting facility that's being proposed. So open space is not an asset intended to be freely developed or traded at the whim of elected officials. It is a widely understood purpose of the open space tax we pay, and that the public overwhelmingly supports, that purchased land is meant to be set aside forever, that it remains as protected space. It is a common understanding of what open space means. Even if a compelling argument can be made in support of a horse trade, it doesn't change the basic principle, especially when a compelling argument for any trade can be made for any open space property. And in truth, because such compelling arguments are easily made, it only strengthens the basic premise of setting aside land in perpetuity. Land that is purchased by the people for exactly that, to protect it from trading, from development, for anything other than protection in the common understanding of the word. In this case, a compelling argument does not rise to compelling reason. So I've heard the idea to relocate the Martin Street operations to the proposed Distal composting facility is now off the table, but as we all know, bad ideas never truly die. A couple of years ago, Senate Bill 23213 was proposed. That was the big and terrible zoning and housing, et cetera, bill that was being proposed in Denver. City Council at the time voted to oppose it, and it was ultimately shelved by our state legislature. Of course, it came back in pieces, and I believe City Council supported each of those. And one of those was the gift by Governor Polis and company that allowed unlimited, unrelated adults living in residential housing, and we see the impacts of that today in our city. So anyway, back to the topics. If we actually care about what is promised by community recycling, that is saving resources, moving the city's recycling and the tree and limb division facility to Distal is a really bad idea. So buying a TV and driving the empty box to Martin Street is already a resource negative action. Driving the additional miles to Distal will only exacerbate this. Encouraging illegal dumping is also a potential unintended consequence of making the dropping off of large items such as water heaters more difficult. And I've mentioned this before. I'm familiar with the Seattle area. I have family that live up there, and illegal dumping is just a huge problem up there. And the city has done things, the city of Seattle, of raising rates and such, and making recycling really an onerous situation for the people that live there. And illegal dumping is crazy. So that up there, it's all over the place. So anyway, if we make it harder to drop large items off, it's likely that we'll start seeing things like that around our city. So that's what I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. David Rex.
Sometimes I just, yeah, that's what I do.
My name's David Rex. I live at 1767 County Road 20 and a half in Weld County. My wife and I spent a couple of years looking for a small place in the country as our toes-up home, specifically outside of Boulder County, so we wouldn't have to deal with this kind of nonsense about the Distal toll swap. And yet here we are, forced to deal with what we tried to escape. With the stroke of a pen, you all can undo what we were hoping for. If this industrial site is so beneficial for the people of Longmont and Boulder County, but not us, maybe you could carve 100 acres or so out of the tens of thousands of acres of open space land in Boulder County. My guess is the citizenry of Boulder County and Longmont don't want to deal with the ugly part of this kind of operation any more than we do. We get no benefit from this proposal, and we have to pay all the practical and aesthetic costs. I am also certain that none of you are going to take a hit in your pocketbooks from the decrease in your real estate values. I am virtually certain that if any of you were in our shoes, you would not vote to allow this swap. So this is how representative government works. Make people who have no official voice pay. Thank you.
So Nathan, I couldn't make out the last name.
Drashner. My apologies.
Drashner. Oh, no. Okay, thank you.
Odd German spelling, my apologies. My name is Nathan Drashner. I live at 2205 Whining Drive. I've spoken in front of you guys a couple times about the issue regarding the residents on Winding Drive. You provided me some guidance to contact the state. I just kind of wanted to follow up with you guys and let you know I attempted to do that. I'd actually contacted the Colorado Agency for Recovery Residences, which is the agency that certifies this sort of facility. Initially, when this issue first came up, they were very open and communicative with me. Actually, they sent me a really good one-page fact sheet. They actually gave me his cell phone number, told me to contact them anytime if I had any further questions. After you guys provided that guidance and we'd figured that out, I reached back out to him. That was about a week and a half ago. I left a voicemail on their agency line, and I texted him at the number that he provided me. No one's responded. I tried to reach out to the BHA, who manages that contract with that agency. I emailed the number, the contact that I found on the state website. I got a bounce back. The email address said the email address doesn't work. I called the BHA and left a voicemail because no one picks up the phone at the BHA. No one's called me back. My next step was about a week ago to contact Representative McCormick. I wrote her an email and left her a voicemail. She also has not contacted me back. So any sort of support you guys can give me in trying to work with the state and our community and working with the state would be much appreciated because they aren't communicating with us. Anyway, and just kind of beyond that, I mean, I understand you guys are working on stuff. It was a little disheartening for all of us to not see it on the agenda tonight. If there's anything you guys can do to kind of just provide us updates on your process and stuff as a community. I know I've been working with Chief Artis, and he sent us an email back, but he wasn't able to provide a lot of information. So I would appreciate seeing it as an agenda item until we get this resolved going forward. I understand if you can't make choices and you need to wait on the vote, but just even 5-10 minutes of an update, I think we'd all really appreciate. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Harold, I have a question. When is that coming back? I know for a study session, it would not come back to us. It would come back during a regular meeting.
Let me look at the calendar.
Okay,
I think they were trying to get it next week.
Okay.
But they had to get the maps that you requested finished, and
yes,
I think they're just now finishing that up.
okay.
Let me see what meeting. We'll probably put it on the. I know we could probably hit the first, which
Okay.
is because you all are still in a zero reading because you wanted us to bring back more information for you to look at.
Yes,
So definitely the first.
the
I
first,
think we can
okay.
hit.
So, sir, the first. That will be coming, it will be on the agenda.
Yeah, no, I'm aware.
Okay, sounds good.
Just love it if it was every week, just something. Thank you.
Yeah, no, in a study session, we typically don't move forward on ordinances. So, and the last name on the list is Scott Stewart.
Oh, here we go. Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, Scott Stewart, 229 Grand Street. I think we can agree that the airport operations over the last few years are far different than when the town started the airport. Members of the flying community often say, you knew there was an airport there when you bought your home. There is some truth to that statement, but the reality is the airport is nothing like what it was when it started or when I bought my home. The flying community will tell you how vital the Longmont Airport is and how much revenue it generates for the city. The airport is an enterprise zone. The money generated at the airport is obligated to stay at the airport. To get an idea of the outside financial impact, meaning hotel stays, restaurant visits, just ask to see the overnight tie-down and hangar rental fees that the airport collects. I think that you will find it is not representative of the claimed 22,000 out-of-state visitors that enter Colorado through Vance Brand Airport. The airport relies heavily on FAA and state grant money to perform basic operations and maintenance required at the airport. The airport also leans heavily on these obligations and these grants as a form of protection. The threat of litigation from the FAA limits the city's ability to make reasonable decisions pertaining to the airport. I ask that you look into the airport as a self-sustaining entity that generates its own funding without taking obligated grant funds. Operational weight-based landing fees can be the beginning of a self-sustaining airport. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we're moving on to our closed public invited to be heard, and we're moving on to special reports and presentations. I believe we do not. So item 6, study session item A, consideration of modifications and additions to the city's down payment assistant program, and it will be presented by Molly O'Donnell.
I'm going to pass it along. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. Molly O'Donnell, Housing Director. I'm going to pass this off to the team tonight. They've been working really hard on this. Christy Wiseman, our Housing Investment Manager, and I'm introducing Katie Silvis, our home ownership specialist that we hired in the beginning of 2024. And we would not have been able to make progress on this program without that hire. So I want to say thanks for approving her position in the budget back in '24. She comes with a great wealth of experience in the real estate world, and she's been an integral part of the team. So I'll pass it over to Katie.
All right, good evening, members of council. As Molly introduced us, I'm Christy Wiseman. I'm the city's housing investment manager, and Katie and I are very excited to be talking about down payment assistance with you tonight. I'm going to start with a brief overview of down payment assistance in Longmont. We've really done a lot of program archaeology the past several months in looking at what down payment assistance has the city provided and what funding programs has that come from. So we actually have been doing down payment assistance in Longmont since the late 90s, which was interesting to learn. I believe our first loan we discovered was from 1997. And the story that I want to tell with this slide as well as the next slide is that the program has seen many changes, many iterations, and there's been many different funding sources feeding into down payment assistance in Longmont. So where have we gone to where we are today? So in the past, there's been specific infusions of home money for down payment assistance. So HOME is a HUD program. You would think it's an acronym, but it's not. It's just HOME. And so this is federal money that initially would be given through the state Department of Local Affairs Division of Housing. So Longmont received state home awards multiple times in the past. So notably 1999, 2001, and then there was a period where we actually used our CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant allocation for down payment assistance for a time in the early 2000s. And the early 2000s, as you'll see on the following slide, was really the height of the program. We were doing dozens and dozens of loans every year. That CDBG wound down, was never used for down payment assistance again after 2005. And then we got another infusion of HOME in 2010. In 2007, Longmont joined our HOME Consortium, which is a collective of City of Longmont, City of Boulder, Boulder County, and the County of Broomfield. And from 2007 onward, we got home money direct from HUD, so not passing through the state, which has different requirements. And then kind of bringing us up to modern days, last year in 2024, you all approved an initial pilot allocation of $250,000 out of the Affordable Housing Fund for DPA. And then tonight, we will very excitedly give you our results of our recent Prop 123 grant award from the state. So this chart kind of as a visual of what I just talked about, which is there have been specific infusions of money for down payment assistance, and then in between those infusions, the program has relied on program income. So when folks pay their loans back, when they sell their homes, we get that money back in and can then go make more loans. So the big things to note here are just the trends over time. It's really in that early 2000s, kind of pre-2008 recession period that the program was pumping out loans. And then we really saw the effects of the housing crisis in, up through 2012, as well as obviously COVID, on increase of home prices, and really the DPA program fell off. And concurrently, because we were no longer getting infusions of home from the state, we weren't having that new money coming in, so we were fully reliant on just payoffs and program income to keep the program going. And then another thing to note is in 2018, the city did petition the state to allow program income to be funneled towards developments instead of just more DPA loans, because the writing was kind of on the wall that home from the state was not really working with the housing market. And the staff at the time was trying to creatively find ways, could we use that money to create inventory by investing in development projects instead of just making, waiting till you got enough money to make a loan and then waiting several months to be able to make another loan. So that's kind of the history of DPA. And then I will turn it over to Katie, our homeownership program specialist, to talk about where we are now and what we've been working on over the past several months.
All right. Hello, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council members. My name is Katie Silvas. I'm the homeownership program specialist here with Housing and Community Investment, and I'm very excited to talk to you about what we have coming up for our down payment assistance programs. Our federally funded home program is really challenging to use on the best of days. So it's got a lot of complex requirements in it that it just took a number of months for me just to figure out which way was up to even get a loan out the door in the first place. So last year I was successful in getting a handful of those out, but we ran into a bunch of things and what I like to call bump my nose on quite a few things as we were trying to get this whole program implemented. So we basically the Boulder County Down Payment Assistance Program hasn't met the needs of the residents in Boulder County for a number of years at this point. And this program is specific to Boulder County outside the city limits of Boulder. So we're serving everyone but the city of Boulder in this particular program, not just the city of Longmont. So we do have some modifications to bring the program up to current federal requirements with the home program, just to bring it in line and make sure that we're operating and using the program correctly. So just to kind of see how much demand we have for the program, there's currently 32 outstanding down payment assistance loans right now with an outstanding balance of $392,000. There were 33 when I first wrote the slides, so we were lucky enough to help someone pay off their loan. They came in, made their final payment last week, which is always an exciting day. Currently, we have $72,000 in funds for Boulder County down payment assistance. With the price of homes and as much assistance has been requested, I'm going to guesstimate that's about 4 more families that will be assisted. And then all other applicants after about August of last year have been waitlisted while we update the program. We heard about the Prop 123 DPA application coming, and so we just put everything on hold to see how that worked out. And so that's how we got to where we are now. At the end of last year, we had 51 full applications. I had 4 closings, which were the first 4 since 2017. I have another 11 applications received so far, but again, no closings as of yet. We did receive our award for our $750,000 from the state for Prop 123, which is fantastic. We're very excited about it. So that brings our total kind of DPA bucket of money, we've got our $72,000 for Boulder County DPA, our $250,000 that the city approved last year, and then our $750,000 from the state, which brings us up to over $1 million in down payment assistance funds available to be used very soon. Last year, so on June 15th, the City Council approved our action plan with that $250,000 initial pilot program. We did present what we're about to show you to the HHSAB, the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board, last Thursday. We do have some feedback that they gave us to share with you guys. And we're basically looking for your input and any recommendations for what we're about to show you. So if you have questions, you can ask them in the moment or wait till the end, whatever your preference is.
And before Katie gets to the program specifics, I want to mention two things. One is that we're very excited for our $750,000 Prop 123 grant. We got our award letter last Wednesday, but that was really successful because of your initial $250,000 investment. We would not have been able to make our case to the state without that local investment first. And so I just want to reiterate how important leveraging is in the work that we do. And so your first money in allowed us to go to the state and say, hey, give us a fairly sizable Prop 123 award for this program to bring state general dollars back to Longmont, which I love doing. So wanted to emphasize that. And then I also just wanted to reiterate our appreciation for HHSAB and our two presentations that we went over proposed program guidelines with them. They gave really great feedback. They're a very dedicated board, and we would not be here without their input. So thank you to HHSAB members.
All right, so with an effort to make the down payment assistance programs as similar and easy to understand as possible, there's just a few basic things that we're recommending be the same across the board. So first of those is going to be a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, so no adjustable rate mortgages or any other predatory loans. There's a whole definition of what that has to be that we follow, but the basic concept is it needs to be a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, and none of those terms get to be flexible over time. You know, it needs to be fixed without any way to kind of change things on the borrower. We're recommending a 2% interest rate, which is reduced from 3%, which is what we currently have for Boulder County down payment assistance, with the additional recommendation that any borrowers below 60% AMI receive a 0% deferred rate, meaning no monthly payments and no interest rate. Our maximum loan amount currently is up to 10% of the purchase price with a maximum of $40,000. We are limited to 10% with our home funds and our Prop 123 funding. But our local DPA, the $250,000 from the council, and that doesn't necessarily have to stay that way if you choose. Okay, our application fee for each program for each application is $25. It does have to stay the primary residence of the borrower the entire time the loan is in place. We do that using a verification of occupancy on an annual basis. And then the borrower requires homeownership and financial counseling before closing so that they're in the best position we can get them in to stay a homeowner once they become one. So here we've got our differences across the program. So our Boulder County Down Payment Assistance Program serves up to 80% AMI, same with our local DPA fund, but our Prop 123 funding does go up to 120% AMI. If you've heard it in the news, you've heard that probably referred to as the missing middle, so people who don't necessarily qualify for subsidized housing but make too much for additional help. This will be a huge benefit to that group of people. Our geographic area served, like I said earlier, the Boulder County Down Payment Assistance Program serves the entire county outside the city of Boulder. For our local DPA, it's just going to be residents within the city limits of Longmont. Our annual income limit data source for Boulder County DPA is HUD Home. They have a matrix that they post for every county in the country every year. And we are able to, here with our local funds, we're able to use a CHAFA program instead that actually breaks all those income limits up to 120% AMI. We don't have that benefit with HUD, and so that would require a lot more math and noodling around with numbers, and we would just prefer to use something that breaks it out for us, and we have the flexibility to do so. And then there is no first-time or first-generation requirement with our Boulder County DPA program. We're not recommending one for our local DPA, but there is a preference for that for the Prop 123 funding. And then we've also got limits on assets and cash reserves. We'd like to bring that up to $50,000, which is the current limit for HUD, up from $25,000, which was in our policy before. And I'd like to match that across the local program and then the Prop 123 program as well. They limit it to $25,000, but we can do a waiver on a case-by-case basis up to $50,000, depending on each particular application, and that's just additional paperwork that we're going to have to do as that comes up. The mechanism for that asset limit is so that we have folks who, we are not providing assistance to folks who could go out and pay for a market rate home on their own. That asset limit is a really important part for how this program and income qualification works. So that'll, even if we have someone who income qualifies at, 70%, 60%, or wherever they end up at, if they have $600,000 in liquid cash from like an inheritance or something like that, they have to spend that down to $50,000, and their proceeds from that cash that they have has to go into their down payment. Ideally, if they spend all that down, they don't need down payment assistance from me because they can do it themselves, okay? Where that that doesn't apply to any retirement assets, so anything that's a tax-advantaged retirement account. They're like educational savings account for children. We're not requiring people to spend down their retirement funds. We definitely don't want that. But any other cash or easily to liquidate assets that they have need to be used. So that helps us assist the folks who need it the most for this particular demographic. The debt to income and housing cost calculation for Boulder County DPA is 31%. That means that no more than 31% of their monthly income is spent on housing. So that's going to include their mortgage payment, interest rates, homeowners insurance, HOAs, things like that. For our local DPA, we're recommending up to 35%. You'll see typical mortgage lenders go up as high as 42 or 45%. They will rarely go any higher than that. But at 35%, I think we're pretty comfortable with that being a good limit for folks for our programs. And then we have our environmental restrictions. So this is one, when I was talking about bumping my nose on something earlier, this is a big one. So the Boulder County DPA requires that we not put homes within 3,000 feet of trains, 1,000 feet of major roadways, or within the 500-year floodplain. With the train going through town the way it does, that limits a pretty significant part of homes available to residents here, and we just can't use Boulder County DPA with that. It's just not allowed. There's no way around it. With our local funds, however, we're not recommending any kind of environmental restriction other than that if a borrower is in a floodplain, they maintain homeowners insurance and flood insurance on that property. Same thing with our local DPA, or our Prop 123 bucket, just maintain flood insurance if that's where they choose to live. Next, we have our payment options. So we did quite a bit of research into what our peers are doing in the area, other cities, and other down payment assistance providers. So what we are recommending, or what we're seeing, is that they are doing mostly low interest or zero interest loans and no payments. So they're all mostly deferred loans just to get people into homes. The kind of underlying message there is that other providers feel that it is more important just to get people into homes than it is to make this a loan fund that accrues money for the next person. So we've got a couple of options to send to you that would allow us the flexibility to follow advisory board direction and serve folks as best we can. So the first is going to be a regular loan, monthly payments starting immediately after closing. That's that same 360 payments that they would go correspondingly with their primary mortgage. Second, we're going to have fully deferred loans for those at or below 60% AMI. Third option is going to be annual payments from escrow if this is allowed by the primary lender. This is something we definitely need the primary lender to agree to collect and then send to us. It is more legwork for them, but it keeps our buyers from having to make multiple payments And possibly if they ever get in a situation where they have to choose between one or the other, they don't have a choice. It all goes to the same place. So, and then last is going to be our partial deferred. This is one that for those folks who end up in a situation where their DTI, the debt to income, gets kicked up over that 35% because of their primary mortgage insurance payments. We have seen that happen a couple of times. That primary mortgage insurance is an additional fee from the primary mortgage lender when a borrower doesn't have 20% to put down onto their home. By nature, if they're coming to us for down payment assistance, they don't have that 20%. So the folks we work with are going to be paying that PMI almost across the board. That PMI is, again, having it based on how much is borrowed against the home. If they're over that 80%, there's nothing we can do to change that. We can't change that on the primary lending side. So to keep their payments low, what we're suggesting is a 10-year deferment period. That'll give them enough time to pay against their primary mortgage and for the home to hopefully naturally raise in equity with the market so that they can come back and have that PMI taken off of their mortgage payments. At that point, once that's removed, our payments then start at year 10, and for the remainder of the period, they make their payments and pay us back. We do have this set up as a model where the 2% interest where it applies accrues during that 10-year deferment, and then they pay it back. And that was just kind of based off feedback from the advisory board from our initial meeting with them last summer to make it more of a revolving loan fund instead of when someone comes to sell it, they want to see some of those payments come back more regularly. So this was kind of our way to make sure that we have some flexible models to serve the needs of every borrower that comes in with an application. So items with council input, here's what we're asking for. So HHSAB recommended approval of the program guidelines as we presented last week. We do have an additional item after this slide to talk with you about, but these are the things that they accepted. So we're requesting that you accept the staff recommendation for the down payment assistance portfolio as presented. That's going to include the liquid asset limit after closing of $50,000, excluding tax advantage retirement accounts, college savings plans, et cetera. The 2% interest rate for all programs, the 30-year loan term. Historically, it was a 10-year loan. With the price of homes, there's no way we could make a 10-year loan work, so we're recommending that we bump that out to 30. A menu of loan options available to applicants. Again, we just want to have the flexibility to best meet people where they're at the time of application. And loan assistance up to 10% of the sales price up to $40,000 limit. And then allow homes in the floodplain requiring flood insurance for our local DPA funds. Or we can change program elements per your direction. Do you want me to go to the next slide?
Okay. Do we have any comments or questions?
We also have a slide that we prepared showing basic program elements of peer DPA programs in the region, if it would be helpful to see what some of their organizations are doing related to term, interest rate, things like that.
Okay. Well, let me call on a couple of council members, have them answer their questions, and then we'll go to the other slide. So I have Councilmember McCoy. Let's see, hold on. No? Oh, come on.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, thank you so much. I think it was really informative, and I like the recommendations. I think our Housing and Human Services group has made some good points here, and I would agree with them. So if you're looking for direction, there's some from me.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. First of all, congrats on the grant.
Thank you.
Love to see that kind of leverage going on. I think that's a great point to make and really makes our dollars go further. So that's fantastic. I'll echo Councilmember McCoy's just compliments to the staff and to the Housing and Human Services Board for all the work on this and the input into this. I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding and the public's understanding that the DPA program overall is a revolving loan fund, right? Despite the grant coming from the state and the funding that we've put up, it is ultimately run as a revolving loan fund. So it's not a grant that goes to the down payment assistance is not in the form of a grant,
Correct.
right? It is a repaid revolving loan fund at a certain period at a certain rate.
Correct. Longmont's down payment assistance programs have always been in the form of a loan, and that is what we are recommending that to continue here as well. And that is our state Proposition 123 award was predicated on having that 750 be part of a revolving loan fund. And I do want to add, I know there was a public comment earlier about how do you grow the program over time. So that's an important component is the revolving loan fund. But also the way that the state's awards are set up is they're proposing a 2-year contract for that 750. So if we can successfully deploy those state dollars over 2 years, then we would go back to them and ask for another infusion. So as long as we're running the program successfully and state Prop 123 has, grants available for DPA, then we would plan to continue applying.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so not only is it a revolving loan fund, but it really does reinvest in not the initial grant, like the initial lendees, if you will, but also then generations down the road as this gets repaid. And it kind of stacks as we build up kind of that reserve or fund capability over time, correct?
Yeah, correct. And I would add, and this, obviously the interest rate is an item that we're looking for council feedback on, and it's really about striking a balance between having a below market rate interest rate that is helpful and a significant difference from their primary mortgage interest rates, which we know right now are much higher than the 2% we're proposing, but
For sure.
having it be significant enough so that we are seeing the loan pool grow over time. So that is a trade-off, and that's the number we feel comfortable with, and that's why we're proposing it, but also happy to hear council input on the interest rate.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, personally, I think that's a strategic interest rate, and it serves kind of our purposes and broader goals of affordability here and increasing access to homeownership. So I'm generally supportive of that number. I had one question that I emailed you and Molly about earlier, and so I'll just kind of reiterate that for the public and for council's awareness. But when you were looking at the analysis of deferment of payments to 10 years and kind of the expectation that recipients of the down payment assistance would still have a PMI, I think you were specifically saying you basically assume everyone will have a private mortgage insurance
That's correct. Yeah.
aspect of this. I was just curious if either the Housing and Human Services Board or staff or a combination of the two considered alternative structures or a substructure that could eliminate PMI needs altogether. I realize you probably only have that flexibility with the local funds, that 250. And the thought behind that is the PMI, I recently paid mine off. Like that's basically money that is sent out of resident pockets and really out of state or out of the city, certainly. And I was just wondering if there's a way to kind of recraft part of this, not the whole thing, but to allow for a structure where the city could put up enough that could cover for some new homeowners to avoid PMI altogether.
Sure. So the way to do that would be to have a grant up to 20% to make sure that it got them to a point where they had that 80% loan to value, which is typically the amount that triggers PMI to not be charged to that
Right.
borrower by their primary mortgage lender. When we originally brought this to HHSAB last summer, they recommended a revolving loan fund with payments. So by nature, it's a loan that puts them above that 80% loan to value level. If the council wants to flip this to a grant, there are ways to do that, but that's what it would be, a grant rather than a loan, and that grant would have to be either forgivable over time or paid back at closing. But I'm not sure what that paid back at closing would do on the loan to value side. So that would be a conversation we'd have to have with some lenders to see what they see on their end to try to get rid of the PMI altogether.
Yeah, that's interesting. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on why that would be considered a grant? Why you couldn't just do a full loan value there?
Yeah, so the PMI is based on how much is borrowed against the home total, regardless of how many lenders there are. So your primary mortgage lender is going to say, okay, if we're loaning you 90% the value of the home, and then you're coming to Longmont for that 10%, we're still borrowing 100% of the value of the home.
So you could loan 20% and it still wouldn't change the PMI calculus.
Correct. It would have to be a grant.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The best example of that is when someone has family that helps them purchase a home, you're required to get a letter that essentially says that you're not required to pay this back to the family member to actually deal with that issue, because if it's ever considered a loan, it goes back into the value.
Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, Molly O'Donnell. I just wanted to let you know that in crafting this over the last, 9 months, we did analyze a range of options in terms of how much assistance should we give on a per person basis. And so we just ran, it's just an example of running a couple numbers, that the higher amount of assistance given means we help fewer people. And so if you gave up to 5% of the sales price, and 10% are shown here. So if we did go up to 20%, whether it was a grant or loan, either way, that would just reduce by half the number of people we could serve.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Cool. Thank you. It's clear that there's a lot of thought and that's gone into this, a lot of work that's gone into this. Thank you for clarifying that piece of it. Appreciate it.
Okay. Let's come over here. Councilmember Christ.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, my goodness. This was very comprehensive, so thank you. I did ask Molly for a little more information about how many homes are on the market at the purchase price of $400,000, and she came back with since January there's 67 on the market at that rate. I guess we would have to look at them to see, if they fit the parameters of not being near a train, or are they on the floodplain. I know our floodplain is a little large right now from a prior discussion with flood insurance, that will change over time, which is good. But when you look at the numbers and you see 67 are available, that really means about 5 more people could qualify just at this rate. And I'm wondering, there's some real niggly points to this, I'm sure you all know, because you've been massaging it, trying to make it work. One of the things is the 2% interest rate. And I noticed in your communication that you had talked about deferring that and then making it part of an escrow accumulation. And one of the issues I see with that is that often escrow has a 2% cushion. Mm-hmm. So now we're talking 4%. And then I also saw that the average length of ownership is about 8 to 8.8 years. And so that means that when they go to sell, they actually have a balloon payment in that they have to pay back this loan. That could potentially continually raise the cost of the homes because maybe they don't have that much equity, or they don't want to give up all their equity, so they'll raise the price of the home or try to by another $40,000 so that they can pay back, plus the 2 to 4% that they now owe. So I'm a little concerned just about that mechanism. And then I was looking, I asked for newer information. Last year we got 2023 median income numbers. And really, we're talking about family income, because in 2023, a family income in Longmont was $144,100. So they're probably the only ones who can afford this monthly mortgage payment of $3,000 per month. If you're looking at the average earnings per job is about $84,000. That was last year's number. So one of the issues that I see with this is that if you're a single mom, this may be hard to qualify or be able to make these payments. And so it really requires a 2-income family. And then additionally, if you are self-employed in any way, generally it's more than 10% of a down payment that you have to make on your home. So I just see that it's a fairly narrow field, but it is a beginning. I'm just saying that I do think probably the biggest issue, and you mentioned that, Katie, or I'm sorry, Christy, is that it's the 2% interest rate. And so I'm wondering if maybe the problem is the deferment. Maybe rather than have a full deferment, you could have interest-only payments in the first 8 years. That would not be very large, and that could be made during the PMI. And so that then just the principal is owed, so at least you know what you're up against if you're only going to keep your home for 8 years. I don't know. Those are interesting ideas about adjusting the PMI, but I think we need some more creative thought on that. Because I don't support like using less money or helping fewer people by using grant, turning it into a grant, but there must be some way we can adjust that percentage of loan to value for people. So I don't have an answer for that. I'm just saying that, and I see that as a big problem as well.
Thank you, Counselor. Yeah, I would say staff's very open to the idea of interest-only payments during that 10-year deferral. That's also something we've thrown around. Katie has lots of Excel spreadsheets going. So if that is a direction council wanted to go, we're open to that input. And I will expand on, you were talking about income levels, and this is also why our Proposition 123 grant was so critical, because that funding source allows us to go up to 120% AMI. So that means we can serve all the buyers of the True North development, for example, whereas the HUD rules, as well as our existing, the initial $250,000 investment, because of the nature of the Affordable Housing Fund, is capped at 80% AMI. So the state's award really allows our suite of DPA programs to serve a much broader swath of the Longmont community and really getting into that workforce income range, which is why, in addition to just the increased volume of money available for loans, but having that higher AMI level was really something we were hoping to achieve.
Yeah, that's helpful. That was another question I had, was this particular to a program that we have going, because that crossed my mind as we were looking at it. There was one other thing I wanted to mention. Hold on, let me scroll down here a bit. Well, I'm just going to reiterate about the 2% interest. If they could make interest payments only and not have it through escrow, that would save. So we'll start there as an input. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rodriguez, do you have any input on council direction?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I would say that the menu options, adding the interest only, I think is a good way to go. Just as a menu option, if you will, since you provided that. I think when it comes to sustainability and growth ability of a DPA program, I think it really doesn't need to be said, but the fickle nature of federal funding and oftentimes state funding as well would really constrain any sort of long-term projections for growth or sustainability of the program. So the more that we can bring in-house and grow our in-house options for that will really secure the program at large. And I know I'd be in support of continuing to make those kinds of budgetary allocations when available and appropriate. I think that generally speaking, your list of recommendations is really good considering the constraints the program has seen over the last 20 plus years and how many people have been served in the last 10 years. So I think that you've really, with not a whole, obviously you were able to research surrounding communities, but it would be hard to build a program like this based off of just internal data based on what you presented to us. So I think you did a really good job with that. And I'm excited to see how the program functions, for the next few years because then you can really build that baseline and decide where you can make tweaks to strengthen the program. So I'm fully for the recommendations put by staff and possibly adding the interest only option. So.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with everything that's been said. So my only question is in regard to the Prop 123 funding, the $750,000. How is the state determining? Are they, essentially designing it for people or intending it for people who are kickstarting a program like this and then they move on to another municipality? Do we reduce our chances the next go around if because we're tapping into it for this 2-year cycle?
That's a really good question. So to be considered for another allotment from them or another grant award, we have to spend down the $750,000 that we got to begin with. So if we're not capable as a staff to make that happen, then there won't be any more Prop 123 money. There just won't.
Okay.
So they do ask quite a bit about the experience of the staff, what our program has looked like in the past, who we've been able to serve, how many people we've been able to serve. So our entire the history of the DPA program has served 418 loans since the late 90s. That has been over $3 million over the course of that time. So what we're asking for with this, slightly over $1 million fund is significantly more than we've ever had at one time in the history of the fund, but also our home prices are significantly higher than they ever were. So in order to to answer your question, in order to come back for additional funds from the state, we have to prove that we are an entity that can handle this many loans and be able to run the program successfully.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
if I can jump into that question, I think generally what we're seeing in the state programs, performance is going to be key in terms of what we have and how we're going to get awards. One of the things to put in perspective, you all touched on it earlier, how we're leveraging local funds. So how we leverage the 250 that you put in, how that applies to it. When we think about the awards that we've received over the last year or two, it's all about the leveraging of the local funds. And I think communities that put skin in the game actually perform better in these requests. For perspective, they've pulled in the last 2 years, $3.3 million in different housing grants. So we had $1.8 million, which was the IHOI grant that was part of purchasing the land for True North. They had another $750,000 that we got from Prop 123 that was related to True North, and then $750,000 in this project. So performance is going to be key. If you look at what the state's putting in and you look at land development code, they're really starting to push what are you doing in your land development code? What does that look like for transit-oriented development? So they're putting markers that is dependent on many things that we do as an organization. Then the better we perform, the better we're going to compete for funds in the future.
Okay, great. No, thank you. That answered my question. And I am in agreement. I would like to see what that 2%, what was that, interest in that first, interest only in that first bracket, what that would look like. So, okay. Do you need anything else from us?
I did have one more point we wanted to bring up related to the advisory board. Thank you for that input thus far. That's extremely helpful. So as we mentioned, we came back to the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board last week to present the recommendations before you here, and they approved all of the program parameters, but there was one policy item that was brought up that we wanted to make sure you heard for your input. So the board did ask about whether we had considered a local preference policy for DPA, meaning you would have to either already live or work in Longmont to qualify for this program. So we are not considering that. And if that's something council was interested in, it would only apply to that $250,000 local money. In general, the state shies away from programs that have a local preference policy. Just they're very conservative legally, and they would be unlikely to approve that. We did talk to them about it. And I will say local preference is generally not a feature of area DPA programs. The city of Boulder is a big exception to this, but this is something we wanted to bring up to respect that policy discussion that was had at HHSAB, and wanted to give council a forum for input.
I'm going to add one comment if you don't
Yes.
mind, Mayor Pro Tem. We at this point, we do not, the DPA program in the past has not been a flood of applicants that we have to select from. It's more rolling. People come in, they qualify. If we have funds available, it all works out and it goes. That could change if our program expands and our interest expands. But that's one reason this has not been an element to date, is that we haven't had to pick between people.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Popkin?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. True to form, I have a couple more follow-up questions. I'll keep them brief. I actually wanted to just thank Councilmember Christ for bringing up the interest only as an option, and just wanted to know if that's how that would be thought about from your end. Like, would that be is it possible to offer that as an option to, like, just purely, and they can choose to do the interest only payments or to defer all the way? And that's how we're interpreting that? Is that how you're thinking about it?
Correct. Yeah, good clarification. So what we're presenting tonight is what we plan to present as that menu of repayment options in our program guidelines. So based on that direction, we would include the 10-year deferment with interest-only payments as an option, and then the applicant would choose if that's the repayment strategy they would like to go with.
It would give them the flexibility to decide how they want to pay
And we
that
would
off.
build, there's we have regulations about providing the financing statements, and so we build out the amortization schedule to show folks the different options when they would apply.
Great. And then on like the 2% specifically, how did you get to the 2% threshold there? Because really, I mean, anything sub 4.5, 5 would be below market. And it's just, I'm sure it's a balancing act of what makes it more affordable versus how do we serve people longer term. So curious about that, and maybe in the same foul swoop, you can answer 40K versus 50K to Councilmember Chris's point. Depending on how many homes are available and the number of loans we're trying to extend, would that offer more degrees of freedom for the program to meet the 2-year goals that you have if we had a little bit more flexibility as to what it could go up to?
Yeah, I'll start, and I'm sure Katie is our resident real estate. She's a realtor, so she'll fill me in on the numbers. But regarding the interest rate, I mean, there is no perfect science to a number. We did a lot of research on peer programs and what other folks are providing. I will say kind of the offers right now in DPA in the metro region, there are a lot of 0% interest programs. We didn't want to go that route, as we talked about. We want this to be a true revolving loan fund, and that was feedback that the advisory board gave pretty clearly. So between 1%, 2%, 3%, 4% and kind of the below market interest, we felt comfortable with 2%. The advisory board felt comfortable with 2%. So that's where we landed. This slide, I just wanted to throw it up to give you an example of, again, peer programs around the area and kind of get a sense of where popular DPA programs that people apply to are at. Do you want to add on?
Yeah, so we internally, when the staff were first looking at putting this together, we looked at 0%, 1%, 2%, 3%, and ran the math with, what those mortgage payments would look like, what PMI looks like, what, the average cost in Longmont would be, and all kinds of stuff. So we initially pitched a 0% fully deferred, program with no monthly payments whatsoever, and the interest and monthly payments were something that came back from the advisory board as something they want, a revolving loan fund that's got a slightly quicker revolution than whenever someone decides to sell their home. So that's where that kind of came from. And then after discussions with peers in the area and looking through their down payment assistance programs and seeing what they had, having a set of options out of, rather than just doing monthly payments, like having some options and flexibility just seemed really important so that, again, we're not forcing people with their mortgage payment and PMI and then our monthly payment over that 35% threshold. It's a pretty low threshold overall, but that's pretty standard with any affordable housing programs. So we're just trying to meet people where they're at. So again, like we're open to comments. I think that interest only is a great idea. I don't have any qualms with that whatsoever, and I think that's just as easy to implement as anything else we have. So, so yeah, it was just mostly advisory board recommendation compared to what we originally thought of. That's how we got here. I do want to go through a couple of these in the area. So the CHFA second mortgage loan, the CHFA loan is probably one of the most commonly used second mortgages in the market right now. I myself benefited from this when my husband and I bought our first home. But that's 4% up to $25,000, and we have to use CHFA for your first mortgage. The City of Boulder has two different DPA loan programs, one that comes with a deed restriction for 15 years and one that's a shared equity model for 30 years. That 15-year deed restricted one does require that you pay back at the end of that 15 years. Nothing that we are doing requires that they pay it back at a certain point, unless they go to sell the home or need to refinance for some reason. Metro DPA, which is the City of Denver's program, and all of these, the City of Boulder and Metro DPA are at 0% interest. Metro DPA has that 30-year term, no monthly payments with, rather than an AMI, they went with an income limit model for theirs. Colorado DOH DPA, which is administered by the IDF fund. There's a 0 to 1% with 30 years. The Deerfield Fund is a 0% over 15 years. And First Bank DPA is 4% over 15 years. So the majority of the biggest DPA providers regionally do 0%. So we don't want to go too much higher. I think 5% or beyond is just not, it doesn't make logical sense compared to what they could use on the market comparatively. So that I just wanted to show you guys that and just make sure that you could see that we're not making it up as we go along. We are looking at what our peers are doing in the area.
Yeah, thank you. And then on the threshold of how, like, what the cap is on the 40 to 50?
Yep. So home and Prop 123 cap it at 10%. Or up to $40,000. So we, with those
They
two,
cap it at the 40,000?
They cap it, yep. So we can't change that.
No,
That is not correct?
just to clarify, yeah, so they cap it at 10% of the purchase price. The $40,000 loan maximum limit is a staff proposal. That's a separate, we can propose our own maximum loan amount.
Gotcha.
Oh, for the local funds.
For the local funds, yeah.
For the local funds. Yeah, I would just be curious if it would help the program, if on the administrative side, if it would help kind of get more loans out the door in that 2-year period and maybe add a little bit more flexibility in terms of what's on the market, to Councilmember Chris' point, if we wanted to extend that to even 45,000 or 50,000. I mean, I'm speaking arbitrarily off the top of my head here. Maybe you have data to bring to that. Last comment I'll make, and you can just respond if you have that, is just like, I think this is a really useful strategy as part of our broader portfolio of affordable housing strategies here. So thanks for all the work that you all and the advisory board did on this. Great to see that grant coming into the mix too, so that we can kind of keep this going longer term. So kudos. Would love to hear that kind of what might be that right finesse on upper limit.
So where the 40,000 came from is when we were doing our initial playing around with numbers on interest, repayments, how many folks we can serve with the initial $250,000 allocation kind of last summer into last fall. We started with our city's maximum sales price for a 3-bedroom detached home at that 80% AMI, because that 80% is what our local affordable housing fund can go up to. This was the pre-Prop 123. So that's about $406,000. So that's kind of the price of home we had in mind that we based a lot of these numbers off of. I will say, I don't think staff has an issue if the council was interested in having a higher maximum loan amount, $45,000 or $50,000. You do have to, draw a line in the sand somewhere. But this is where that 40-ish number came from.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Christ.
First, let me say that in your chart, I like your program much better than any of these other people. Okay? I think you did a much better job. And I'm wondering, okay, what about an early or no penalty for prepayment also on the loan? And my reasoning is that generally the reason for building equity is that at some point in your life you want to upgrade to a bigger family house. And so people want to hold on to the equity in their home. So if they're having, positive economic situations and they can prepay, that would actually be easy, easier and better for them in order to be able to upgrade, but at their discretion.
Yeah, that is already in our program guidelines and certainly something we want to encourage. And it's actually, I'm fairly certain Prop 123 does not allow you to have a prepayment penalty. So
it's
fully
we're
in
golden
agreement on that.
Okay, now I have one other question. We were talking about the True North. Doesn't that have a local preference associated with the True North project? No, not necessarily.
Sarah, you're going to go over that? Or
Sure.
You want to?
So the True North project is different in a couple of ways. First of all, that local preference was something that we added in as part of the fee waiver program. And it's really more about, do you work in Longmont? Or do you live in Longmont? Are you moving to Longmont to work? It was to meet some of those community goals. But what's different here is that is our, we're expecting a wave of applicants that then have to be sorted, where in this instance, we don't have a wave of applicants, maybe in the future, but so far it's more of a first come in, first come out situation. That's something we didn't consider for the DPA program just because it is not typical in the market for DPA in our original proposals or our prior programs.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Molly. So also just a way to build reserves of DPA funds. Sooner the payments, the more you'll have a reserve. So if that benefits both the homeowner and the program, that's desirable. So thank you, ladies.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anything else that you need from us?
We're good.
Nope. Okay. Okay, thank you. This was a great presentation.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Okay. So we are now at mayor and council comments. Any comments? We have one more meeting after this. So, yep, Councilmember Popkin.
Thank you. This will be brief. I just wanted to share for council's awareness that, where are my notes on this? So today, I actually submitted my first testimony to the the Colorado Legislature. As a council member and a resident, not on behalf of council at this moment, on House Bill 25-1272, the construction defects law and middle market housing, because this bill, and I checked with staff on this, that seems to be generally advancing some of the housing goals that we had. Unfortunately, because we had a study session this week, and I forget what happened last week now, we didn't even have a meeting last week. We haven't been able to take a position on that. I'll be working with staff to bring that forward next week for us to take a position on, and then we can attach my testimony there, but the committee hearing was today. Okay. So wanted to get that in. I won't bore everyone by reading that testimony right now, but I'll make sure that is included with the packet that we have next week, so you can see what was submitted there. And so I just wanted to give everyone a heads up of what to expect next week, and just that we're trying to get ahead of the timeliness for the state legislative committee hearing.
Okay, thank you. City manager remarks?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
Okay, and city attorney remarks?
No comments, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, so I move to adjourn our meeting. Very good. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, I think I got everybody's ayes. So that sounds like that passed 5-0 with Mayor and Mayor Peck and Councilmember Yarborough out. So we are adjourned.